First of all, I would like to say hello to all participants just following a very intense day. I think that you're participating at this symposium after a very long day, and my valuable panelists, colleagues will be with us, and if they were not with us, we wouldn't be able to be at this point right now. These three colleagues actually made a great effort to be at this point within this project, and we Rahime Gökboğa is the manager of the Turkish Spastic Children's Foundation, Sedef Kanat. She's the she's from the Special Education Center. She's an expert psychologist, and also we have the Mr. Onur Güzel, who is the special, who is the expert psychologist. And I would like to thank them for joining us. Now, today we will be talking about two fundamental things. Indeed, these are two fundamental, or these are two reports about findings. One of them is the evaluation of the inclusion education in secondary school, and this is really important for us, and our colleagues will be sharing the details with you. And our objective here is that to evaluate the drop or the dropping of the rate of the dropout from schools in this inclusion education. And also the second one is about the effects of the COVID-19 on inclusion and integration education. But before we present these reports, we thought that since we have a 4 days of symposium, we have to talk about a new paradigm in education. So accordingly, I just would like to elaborate on this. When we talk about education and paradigm, there are two basic questions. First, why our education system affect the inclusion education in COVID-19, and as well as other aspects. Of course, what we have to know is that we have to know the education paradigms. Where are we in terms of these paradigms, and which glasses we have, and from which perspectives we look on these paradigms, and how these paradigms affect the inclusion and integration educations. In which paradigms have a good role and impact on inclusion and integration education, not only, of course, in integration and inclusion education, but actually the paradigms affect our other fields of life, because these paradigms identify your place in the world as one. So if we just question through this inclusion education, if we just go into the details of the 5 years report, you just come across with a main obstacle. And from the perspective of the teachers and families and parents, from the perspective of the students, we see that the prejudices and behaviors in line with these cause these obstacles. So these show us that without having these general or special education, and actually we should not differentiate as a general or special education, simply actually we do not look into the education as a whole. It shows us that we're just looking at the education from different perspectives. Actually, we're all teachers, and as all teachers, how we should we should look into the fact that how we form the education atmosphere, environment, especially in terms of dropout, in order to understand the dropout rates. First, I will compare Turkey with the world. There are 3 paradigm shifts in the last century. One of them is 1923 and 1989 paradigm. Here in this with this paradigm, the world and Turkey look on the education similarly. In Turkey, in the world, we see the effects of the First and Second World War impacts. There are two different processes, of course, and Turkey has a fundamental objective as to form a national state and increase the number of the educated people and as to train people for mechanical things. And since there is a problem of access to education, I think that in primary, secondary, and secondary school, to ensure an educated community. And we see the similar things in the world, in France, in Germany, and so on and so forth. And after 1947, in Europe, we have the concept of two axis, two polar season, and Turkey actually lags behind in this process. And during this time, the university education is very important. And unfortunately, there are few universities in Turkey as well as in the world, and different than the world in the world, different than in Turkey, in the world, sorry, we have the special education. And how does the paradigm forms difference? The families start perceiving the education, but how, unfortunately, since it's a post-war, especially in until 1988, there is a scarcity culture. So it means that a culture that you win and lose it. And unfortunately, still we're stuck with this paradigm, and we couldn't develop this paradigm. And this is for that reason that we have the general education and special education. So we are dealing with such concepts. And of course, within this process, Europe changes and has changed. And 1988 and 2000 paradigm did not bring us anything different. And during this time, the number of universities increased, and then, and unfortunately, in order to overcome the equality opportunity, there is the approach of educate yourself and save yourself. And unfortunately, this concept increases the number of the unemployment among the youngsters. Why? Because we put forward this approach, educate yourself and then save yourself. However, we have the paradigm the same, scarcity culture, and then we have the educate and save yourself. And unfortunately, we cannot train the people for the mechanical things. However, in the world there are changes, and we are nationals with the paradigm of 1923 until 1988. While we train mechanical people, in meanwhile, the world moves with Europe moves with the world. It has got more flexibility with more universities, with innovation. It starts catching digitalization, and there is this examination in the second importance. And then afterwards, 2000 paradigm does not cause any change in Turkey, just small. It doesn't cause any major changes in the educational philosophy, but the world changes the education paradigm and comes into a new concept. With this concept, actually there is an universal national education. It's an universal national education, not any longer general and special education. So accordingly, there are individual community with entrepreneurship, understanding, as well as innovation, creative. So here, of course, with this concept, we cannot understand this why this universal national concept is important, because this universal national concept is a concept which is brought with globalization, and it embraces all people So there is no discrimination as a national, general or special education, regardless of religion or race. It embraces all. Indeed, there are small examples of this in the last 5 years. There are certain fields that we're honored with. For example, during the pandemics, what is discussed more, it's Uğur Şahin, and Uğur Şahin is a Turkish guy who discovered this vaccination. Why we own this as a country? Because it is universal, because it serves the people, and accordingly with this service provided by him, he makes himself accepted by the whole world. So for that reason, he is a national value. Aziz Sancar, who will have won the Nobel Prize, he made a contribution universally. Because of this contribution, we accept him as a universal national. And for example, Burak Yusuf, who's a sportsman athlete, he gives an universal value, and accordingly it's the slogan, it's the motto for the national team. So the reason for that is that universal model, the new national, which contributes to the universal concept. And for America, what is the universal national? It's Coca-Cola. It's used all over the world. It was accepted by all the world. We all drink it, but it's a national value for the America. So for that reason, this paradigm in education and special education, it should be. So you may ask, it may be discussed, what is it, why is it relevant? But the prejudices are the main obstacles for the special education. The examination system, the mechanical memorization, all these are actually within the education, is a challenge to have a special education. So the way to exit is actually to eradicate the obstacles, and the administrator, the student, the families should be in a position not to be challenged. So the behaviors should be shaped, and accessibility physically should be shaped, and as well as the increasing the human qualification can only be done through changing our glances, perspectives. So we should ensure better teachers, better students, or happy students, happy teachers, happy future. Then we should adopt a better and more comprehensive and inclusive education, universal education. In order to understand this universal and comprehensive and inclusive education as the related parties in education, we have to shape our perspective accordingly. And our perspectives, if we do not wear our glasses like the way we do, then we will not be able to climb the stairs by step, but our existing current perspective would hinder us. I think this 4 days panel should be evaluated from this perspective, and it's really important that you enjoy these 4 days. And now I would like to invite our first speaker to make the presentation. So Ms. Sedef will have the say.
Faik hocama çok teşekkür ederim.
Thank you very much, Mr. Faik, for these valuable contributions, and thank you and hello to everyone. And I hope that it will be beneficial and prosperous symposium for all. First of all, I will talk about the inclusion and integration education evaluation in secondary level, and this is a survey report. And we prepared this presentation with Mr. Onur. And when we talk about the objective of the survey, the student with the special education need should be in an environment with the least restrictive environment and where there would be the utmost meeting of the needs. And here we see the inclusion education is the right solution for that. And for that reason, there the inclusion education is being extended in our country. We see that there are more inclusion students in Turkey, and we see that there are a lot of efforts made by the ministry. But there is an issue which draws our attention in this table. It is that, so actually, this is the aspect that has put the fire in our in start of our project. So there are two graphics that I would like to show you. This is the education reform, and this is a graphic that you also, it's the inclusion students, the number of the inclusion students in the secondary education. So we see that in the yellow columns, we see that how it changes, and in the graphics, and with the red, we see the inclusion education in the secondary compared to the primary schools. And here, when we look into the first and second table, in transition from the primary secondary school, we see that there's a steep drop. And in our survey, we try to find out what are the reasons for this steep drop out and the reasons for that. And we wanted to open this for discussion, and accordingly, in order to increase the awareness, we wanted to present and report to the Minister of the National Education, and accordingly we used two models, and we had the face-to-face interviews as well as focus group meetings. And accordingly, the key relevant key stakeholders were interviewed, and accordingly the results were analyzed, and then we made them into report. And the examples in the survey, we see that there are 10 administrators and guides and class and psychological psychology consultants, and then 10 field teachers, and also families of the individuals who have special needs. And here, in terms of identifying the interviews, we have used the school lists. And here, for the focus groups, as you see in the table here, we have the branch teachers and the custodies of the inclusion students, and also the civil society organizations, and also we have the Istanbul District National Education for District Directorate. In the data collection, the Mr. Faik, Ms. Raime, Mr. Onur, and myself visited the schools, and all interviews, every interview lasted for 30-45 minutes, and then the focus group meetings lasted about 2 hours. And if we just talk about the findings, it's a comprehensive report with the individual experiences. Then we made a SWOT analysis, and we took into consideration the threats, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. First of all, in the strengths, if we talk about the strengths, if we talk about the focus group meetings, we saw that the process for the inclusion education was not full of negativities, and at this point, these are the main points that seem to be strengths. The legislation has got a comprehensive structure. The National Education Minister provides in-service training in special education. The expert schools has got a role model. Some schools have got certain ramps and lifts, for example, which are disabled friendly physical conditions. And in occupational schools, um, are present, and also the students in the inclusion training or education, they experience the socialization, and also typically developing students, they develop the empathy and solidarity skills, and we see that inclusion education creates a win-win situation for both parties in terms of the of course mentally and physically, and in terms of the if we to talk about the weaknesses, as we mentioned, the comprehensive structure of the legislation, we see that this legislation is not applicable on all over the field, and there are certain differences in terms of the individual, in terms of application. And also when there are 40 individuals within a classroom, the students who need special education, it's not possible that the teacher gives this such an education. And also the branch teachers, administrators have not got sufficient infrastructure. And what is this infrastructure? It means that they do not know how to approach to the students or these families, and they do not know how to build a balance between the disabled and normal children. And also accordingly, the children and the administrators and teachers, since they